Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 202, written by Canuckistani lad. In an instant, 4 hours passed. This happened in Winnipeg, Manitoba in the late spring, early summer of 1999. I was living in a gritty neighborhood popular with gangs and unemployed artists. At the time, I was more the latter, and I was clean and sober. I went to the neighborhood coffee shop to drink coffee and read and write alone. This was a local shop, not a franchise. Everyone who worked there wore a carved, wooden, Celtic-style knot on a necklace. I thought it was odd, but there are a lot of artisans in the hood, so I thought they were maybe all fans of some local craftsperson. I sat down at a table for two, facing the door, a habit I picked up from my dad. The server, wearing one of those Celtic wooden knots, took my order. I glanced up at the wall to my right, and the clock said 1 p.m. In an instant, I could hear the staff, and some of the other patrons, laughing and looking at me. I felt embarrassed and odd. Altered. I looked at the clock at my right, and it was 5 p.m. Like in Hereditary, when the outdoor shots of the house changed from day to night, like someone flipped a switch. I was in the exact same position. I didn't feel as if I moved or as if someone moved me. But I was terrified. I grabbed my book and ran home. I never went back to that place. I still don't know what happened. Edit. A few extra comments about my life at the time. I wasn't isolated. I was plugged into a network of local artists and slackers. But I lived alone and was writing a lot. Hours a day. And I was experimenting with the occult a bit, to my regret. Edit 2. Thanks to all of you for your thoughtful replies. This experience is one that has bothered me for literally decades. It's reassuring to know that subs like this exist to give serious thought to these odd experiences. And I have an appointment with the doc in the coming weeks. I'll bring this up and search my memory banks to see if I've had similar experiences that I'm suppressing. You guys rock. Case file number 203, written by Lumpy Constellation. Opposite directions they pass. Goodbye. What the hell? That's them up ahead. Yesterday, my fiance and I, we're both 29, went to a lake about 20 minutes from our house. We're very outdoorsy and love a lake day, and we love this lake in particular because we found a great secluded swimming area. You have to hike 2 miles to get there after parking, so it's often either empty or just adult couples hanging out, sometimes families with older kids. The hike there is one narrow paved road with the mountainside on one side and a steep drop-off into a riverbed on the other side, so there's absolutely no way around it and no alternate routes. We also asked the park ranger the first time hiking it, and he confirmed it's the only trail to the swimming area. So yesterday, we park and start walking, and we notice a guy and his 2 kids exploring the trail a bit, walking back and forth like he's trying to figure out where the lake is. Pretty common occurrence. They were a memorable bunch because the father and son both had bleached sections of hair. Dad had dreads with a few of them bleached, and the son had a bleached mohawk with black hair on the sides. They're walking back in the direction of the parking lot, opposite to the direction we're going, and he asks us where the lake is, and I tell him, about 2 miles ahead. We keep walking and I hear his daughter yell, exacerbated, behind us. 2 miles? And they kept going towards the parking lot. We completed the hike and it was very quiet, no other people on the trail that we saw. It would have been pretty difficult to miss others since this is a secluded area. And if someone wanted to pass us, we would have had to stop to let them pass us, since the trail is pretty narrow and we had our dog with us. So we get to the lake and set up at a picnic table, and I turn to take in the scenery when suddenly, I see the same family. They're already set up, and the kids are even swimming. It's like they've been there for a while already. I ask my fiance if that's the same family, and how they beat us there. He confirms it's the same bunch, but also has no idea. The only thing we could think of is if they walked in the riverbed, but we would have heard their voices echo down there, and any path down there is completely overgrown with trees and shrubbery, so how would they even hike it? And why would they choose to be down there when there's a perfectly good paved trail? and they'd been going in the opposite direction as us when we saw them earlier. Case notes, file number 203. Well, okay, I just had to comment on this one, because it reminds me of another recent story where the guy was sitting in a bar with his friends. He sees a man pass by. Then the same man passes by again from the same direction seconds later. But that was one man. His friends reacted oddly. In this case, you had multiple witnesses who were as baffled as you were. Is God playing with us? Are we in a simulation with developers having a laugh at our expense? Or was it a glitch in the system? Those people's spirits zipping ahead, perhaps in the same way they did eventually leave. Maybe interacting with another family at that time, the same way you saw them interact with yours. A touch of foresight at a distance. If you're enjoying the video, consider leaving a like. Now on to the next story. Bonus file, written by Aorunes. Dad passed away, ashes scattered, yet he was seen again by a lake months later. So, I have recently been riding my bike around our local park, just about every day that the weather allows. Yesterday, I had the music going and was pedaling away like usual, when I came rolling up to a guy and his dog. He just kind of looked at me and smiled like we knew each other. I nodded and went on my way, but there was something about his face that stuck out. It's just a coincidence, I thought. There was no way. But it looked just like my dad. This wasn't my dad that I saw last summer. Not my dad that I remember standing talking in the driveway for the last time. This was my dad's face that I remember in the hospital before he took his last breath. I made another lap around the lake and campground on the other side of the park. I came up to the hill and he was still standing there, almost as if he was waiting on me. He looked at me, waved, and smiled again. He just stood and watched as I was slowly pedaling up the hill. I got to the top and paused for a second, staring at the man through my sunglasses. It felt like I knew him. I looked at him for a second before riding off. It really felt like my dad was standing there. I couldn't bring myself to say anything though, for some reason. I usually pass people several times while riding. I didn't see him again on any path. This was another weird thing that stood out. He was at the top of the hill by the bridge that goes over the river when I first saw him. He was still there when I came back around, but not anywhere along the trails there when I came up around a third time. As a side note, he was cremated and per his wishes, we spread his ashes into that river. My dad always told me stories of how his dad, my grandpa, saw ghosts. My dad never had any ghost stories from his own point of view, well, that I know about. Does anyone have any insight or a similar experience? Bonus file, written by No Name Maddox. A diary to confirm a terrifying memory. I hope this experience fits in here. First time encountering otherworldly entities or spirits. I recall this night so clearly, or so I thought. I am currently reading through all my old diaries, ages 11 to 22, and I came across the night in question. It was in the middle of an entry. For a second, I didn't even know I was reading the same event that touched me so deeply. For context, when I was 12, my mom couldn't find a sitter for a late night meeting, so I had to go with her, along with my younger brother, B, and a friend, Mac. We had to keep ourselves entertained, somehow, in a church at night. Naturally, there's a cemetery in the back we had to fool around in. My entry reads, Me, Mac, and B went into the cemetery in the dark. I screamed and hid behind a gravestone to scare B. Then B taught us a ritual that brings the spirits out. You stand on the gravestone and say, May rise, 10 times. I stood on about 6 stones at different times and did it. Then I was standing on one and Mac and B were facing me. Mac saw something walk towards us and then run. I saw a black something that was hunched over going behind a tree. B saw what I saw. Then we were up near the church more, and I was staring at one that was right next to a tree. I stared at it for a long time and was shaking a lot and fast. Its head moved the most. Then it waited for me to go over there. I'm not crazy. Mac even saw it too. To clear things up, Mac saw something walk towards us and then run. I am standing on a stone, facing B, Mac, the church, and a wooden area to the right of it, where I saw the something. Mac said he saw a tall, robed person standing behind a stone in the back of the cemetery. While she was trying to make out what she was seeing, it appeared a few rows closer. She screamed and pulls me off the grave, falling on my stomach. I looked up to see her and B running towards the church's spotlights, so I followed. I was trying to compute what I thought was a hunched robed person walking behind a tree within the woods next to the church. At the same time, they were absorbed in the figure behind me. Our descriptions of the two different things we saw were oddly similar, though theirs sounded tall, around 7 foot, and mine was short, around 5 foot. I was also to the point that I completely forgot about the part where we stood under the light and stared at one of them next to a tree. All three of us stood there in silence for at least 5 minutes. I remember watching its head rotating around the shoulders, like a pinwheel, so fast it was blurry. Following this experience, I don't recall feeling anything about it. Even my diary entry quickly moves on to another topic. It wasn't until a couple years later when I experienced a similar entity in a cemetery while using a Ouija board with a friend. I felt a dreadful, familiar feeling, one that made me recall the night at the church. On the outside, my skin feels sweaty, like I suddenly got the flu. But on the inside, I'm a dark, hollow carcass, bound to the savageries of the universe. Anyway, I just wanted to share this experience, especially since I found this old diary entry.